All right, welcome into this edition of the Milwaukee Bucks Untapped podcast. Corey Moen, Evan Bernd. Evan, how we doing?
We're good. My school's on spring break. I can finally relax for a little bit.
Enjoy that. Enjoy that.
I will I will try.
All right, so we got a packed show for you guys today.
Mhm.
As always, me and Evan are going to recap the 4 games that Milwaukee had this week. So obviously, Milwaukee went 3-1, 3-1 with wins against Toronto, San Antonio, Utah, and then obviously they had the loss last night to the Denver Nuggets. The other topics we're going to discuss is um, Kevin Garnett with really high praise for Jrue Holiday on a podcast that was posted about a week ago. He does that with former Celtics great Paul Pierce. And Giannis simply shows us why he's the best superstar in the NBA. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Evan, first, Milwaukee last Sunday night played against the Toronto Raptors.
Mhm.
Of all a very, very tough matchup for the Milwaukee Bucks. Always has been. Obviously, as you know, Toronto swept Milwaukee in last year's season series.
Mhm.
The Bucks have been able to win 2 out of the 3 meetings that they've had this season. One last Sunday, 118 to 111. What did you see in Milwaukee's performance against Toronto?
Well, again, it was a close game, only winning by 7. Um the big thing for the Bucks that was one of their bigger killers was the third quarter, which it's usually what happens in most games. You get that first quarter back from the half. They gave up 39 points. But the big turnaround, I think, was then the fourth quarter, only giving up 16 points. So a bad third quarter, but being able to kind of finish off near the end. But kind of looking at it overall, I think one of the biggest things was Giannis, triple-double. Shot 9 for 9 from the field, 1 for 1 from 3. And then had 12 rebounds and 10 assists, a couple blocks in there too. Really dominant performance by him as per usual. But I would say one of the bigger standout that I noticed was Chris, 5 for 8 on threes. I think that was a big standout game for him. Not really just point wise, but 3-point wise. I think he's been struggling with that since he's come back the second time. So that was a nice game to kind of just have him hit those shots that I know he's capable of hitting.
Yep. And Brook Lopez has really been coming on like this season. I've mentioned this before. You knew Brook was capable of putting up these type of numbers,
Mm-hmm.
but this is a renaissance year for him, offensively and defensively. Obviously, he had the 23 points in Sunday's game against Toronto, but like from what I've seen from this year is just nothing short of spectacular.
And it's weird because it seems like as he's gotten older, he's gotten better. Especially coming off of back surgery, he's playing like one of his best careers or one of his best years in his entire career. So it's always good to see. He did not shoot well in the 3, but again, he's hitting a lot of those down low shots in the paint and got to the free throw line 7 times and made all 7 of them. Um, But yeah, really good game from him and just really good games from him for quite a while. Obviously, there's a game here or there where he doesn't, but I'll take 20 points and I hope he can have those kinds of games in the playoffs because I think they're definitely going to need that depending on their matchups.
Yeah, and what makes this particular matchup with Toronto so tough is that they play a lot of matchup zone.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually first in the NBA in terms of steals per game. At least coming into that game, they were at about 9 deflections, and they are really effective playing that matchup zone because those Toronto teams they don't obviously have Kawhi Leonard, they don't have Kyle Lowry, they don't have Marcus Gasol, they don't have Serge Ibaka anymore. They had a lot of length, especially with those Kawhi teams. And now that's what they've drafted to kind of build a good defensive team. They're not good offensively because they have 2 true shooters on their team, meaning Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet. But who they do have is, they have Scotty Barnes, who's underrated. Pascal Siakam, Precious Achua. So there's so much length on that roster, and that type of team just gives Milwaukee fits.
Well, and it especially helps because of Giannis, kind of our tallest and like lengthwise our biggest guy on the team. So Scotty Barnes again is one of those guys who can stop him. Siakam has done that before too. So it's a lot of these guys where the only reason why the Raptors have been able to beat the Bucks so many times because they know, I think, how to stop Giannis when he gets down low in the paint. And if that takes away a huge chunk of your offensive team or scoring, then it's really just kind of comes to the point where what the Raptors can do then offensively. And it's worked quite a few times depending on who gets hot and who doesn't. But again, Gary Trent Jr. has been a huge three-point shooter for them this season, especially for the games they've played against the Bucks. I feel like he's shut the lights out every time.
Yeah, and Fred VanVleet too.
Yes,
Fred VanVleet always seemingly has had a good game against Milwaukee. But actually, here's what I'm going to show. This is actually the first time I do this on the podcast. I'm going to kind of highlight the possessions that Milwaukee can't necessarily have when it comes to the postseason. For some reason, I don't know what it is, because, when you watch an NBA game, right, you watch so many possessions, okay, and you just kind of, these plays kind of become intertwined in terms of like, oh, did that happen? Okay, that happened. So sometimes you have to kind of rewatch it. These three plays that Milwaukee had, I wasn't too happy with. I wasn't too keen on, and it made me a little mad only because of the fact it was such a close game. So I'm going to kind of show you these three right now. Let's see. All right. So the first play is Bucks were in transition, could have gotten an easy 2 points, and this play just can't happen. I mean, come on. I get it. He's bobbling the ball. I get that, but you can't just throw it out of bounds to absolutely positively nobody. And that was like a fastball to Chris Middleton. This next play, and again, the bad plays happen all the time. But the plays that I'm trying to highlight are plays where Milwaukee try to get a little too fancy. So this next one comes from my guy, Jrue Carter. Hang on.
Which was, I think, the next possession for them. They have so many plays where they just don't know sometimes what they're doing. You could probably tell from the Nuggets game last night, but it's like, if you know you're not going to have that shot and you have 4 seconds left, maybe do one more pass if possible, because he clearly had, I think that was Middleton at the wing. I don't know. It's those like rushed plays where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and now you're shooting the ball. Especially in crunch time on back-to-back possessions.
That shot, for one reason or another, has stuck in my mind for the past week. You would think I would have forgotten about it. But when Jrue Carter tried a Harlem Globetrotters dribble, took a turnaround three, like in the shot, it's like, dude, come on, really? We got to pass the ball, okay? And this is where I talk about where it's, and I'm not trying to harp on Jrue Carter, okay? Because I think he's been really good for the Bucks. He's been putting up career highs in points and minutes. Okay, I'm not trying to harp on him. You just don't need those shots. Okay, and that's where I'm alluded to the fact that it's Jrue Carter time. Everyone get out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna make this hero ball three, and it just was like short, and like they obviously got an extra possession. Okay, this last play. I mean, this one isn't as bad, but again, it's kind of being too fancy with the basketball. Comes from Jrue Holiday. Potential first team all defense. Again, just not a play we need.
And I love Zora getting fancy with this and then turns the ball over.
it again, just it's just general sloppiness. And again, I have no idea why those three plays stuck out to me in my head, but it was just like it felt like 3 straight possessions where it was just like turnover, turnover, turnover. Hopefully I don't have to do this too many times, but those 3 plays, especially the Brook one, where you're out in an open fast break and then you bobble it, then you just throw it out of bounds.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
didn't.
especially it being crunch time, back-to-back plays, the first 2, and then the next one was maybe like a minute later. So yeah, it's 3 crucial possessions where you're trying to score on all these with the time restrictions that you have.
Yeah. So other than that, Milwaukee did play a good game. It was 118 to 111. I kind of buried the lead here, but obviously he hasn't played a few games, but Jay Crowder and Goran Dragic didn't play. Dragic still hasn't suited up in a Bucks uniform, so hopefully that happens soon. So next up was against the lowly San Antonio Spurs. Milwaukee demolished them. That's putting it nicely. 130 to 94. And to be fair to San Antonio, and again, it's not like they've been good without these guys being in there, but they didn't have Devontae Graham, Keldon Johnson, or Doug McDermott. So I guess what did you see in Milwaukee's performance against San Antonio?
Again, you got a Giannis crazy 31 and 14 in 23 minutes. But one of the bigger things, if we take Giannis out of the books, Bobby had a really good game. 19 and 10, so another double-double off the bench. He's, I think, like 4th highest now with double-doubles coming off the bench in a season. With I think 21 roughly. But just got a lot of dominant from Giannis, Chris, and Bobby, but then other guys like Joe Ingles with 4 3-pointers. Marjan came in, dropped 7 points near the end. Pat had 10 rebounds. So a lot of guys just doing things, not necessarily scoring, but are helping on the other end, contributing. And Jrue Holiday only had 7 points, but had 8 assists still. So a lot of guys just kind of moving their way around the court, whether that's scoring, rebounding, assists, either one was just really good overall team basketball.
Yeah, I know you're not going to believe this, but this game was actually close in the first half.
It was.
Milwaukee was able to go on a 15-2 run in the first half, and really that kind of took care of things. The game was a wrap by then. Again, this is a really young Spurs team. It's not a particularly good Spurs team, but again, yeah, Giannis again, another ridiculous performance. Spurs didn't really get contributions from many guys. The lone bright spot you can kind of put San Antonio on is Devin Vassell, who had 16 points. But other than that, yeah, Giannis vintage performance, 31 in 24 minutes, which is an insane Giannis stat line that he only had to play 24 minutes. He was like, oh, these guys can't guard me. Like none of these guys could guard me. And here's the other thing too. When this happened in the game against San Antonio, and then we're going to talk about this in a little bit in the game against Utah, he didn't play the entire fourth quarter.
No, they had the Thanasis started the fourth quarter in the next game. We'll get to that.
Oh. So yeah, and again, good Bobby performance, 19 points. Joe Ingles, who again has been a really underrated player from Milwaukee,
red hot from 3.
Oh my goodness, he's been scorching it. And then Milwaukee obviously shot 52% from the field. Just a really hot shooting stretch. And the other thing too, with this being such a young San Antonio team, they will turn the ball over a lot. Milwaukee is able to force San Antonio to have 19 turnovers. Milwaukee kind of did too, though. Milwaukee had 14.
Yeah, a lot of Chris turnovers that game. Very heavily. The starters had, 6, 8, 10, 12 of those? Yeah, Chris had 6. But oh well, they still won by 36. And we also did see, I forgot to mention, the return of Sandro Mamukilashvili. 12 points and 7 rebounds off the bench, 2 assists. Didn't shoot well from the 3, but he's not really a 3-point shooter. 6 for 13 again. 27 minutes, kind of like the expected stat line that you would consider him to be. Again, will obviously progress as his career goes on, but so it's always nice to see the Bucks players, ex-Bucks players, do well on other teams, and I think the Spurs will be a good fit for him in the coming future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he's a good non-playoff guy.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is he's a guy who will perpetually probably be on rebuilding teams. He's obviously not someone that, well, and again, he was in the wrong situation in Milwaukee because he would play really well in the G League, and once he got to the NBA, there just wasn't enough room for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, it's kind of similar to what, and Sandro's on a worse team in San Antonio. It's kind of similar to what Jordan Orr and George Hill are doing right now, where it's like they're not really on a good team, but it's basically their time to get minutes and shine.
Yeah, Noor is balling out. He had 33 last night.
Yeah, I mean, good. It's good to see Sandro back. He does. Again, he didn't show me much when he would get in those games, but yeah, he can play. I mean, and the funny thing is, you mentioned he's not a 3-point shooter, but that's why Milwaukee drafted him, is to shoot threes. But he doesn't do it particularly well. And I mean, it's not like the greatest defender in the world, but he can play a little bit. He's got he can play. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, he's one of those guys again where it's in the past years with some of the guys that the Bucks got rid of. There's only one guy that I wish the Bucks wouldn't have gotten rid of, which was Christian Wood. But again, if hadn't they got rid of him, they would not have won the championship based off of who they were getting in return. But again, they're not bad players; they're just not good to be on the Bucks. They're not players who the Bucks are going to need. So why waste part of their career if they're genuinely not going to use them, which is again a situation that happens with every single team.
Yeah, and again, with Milwaukee contending every year, those draft picks just don't do us any good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful about MarJon. Okay,
I'm too.
MarJon has been playing well so far this year in the minutes he's gotten, and now I know everyone's going to be like, well, why doesn't MarJon play more? Well, it's too late for that, because once Jay Crowder comes back, and once, hopefully, someday in the near future, Goran Dragic plays in a game for Milwaukee, that those guys are always going to get they're always going to be able to play more because just being more experienced. Although, again, like I've said before, hopefully MarJon gets in the rotation next year. So good win for Milwaukee, 130-94. Next up,
next blowout.
Yep. Milwaukee beat the Jazz. They won 144-116. And instead of having me try to recap this, I'm actually going to let Utah Jazz head coach Will Hardy do that for me.
Best post-game interview, I think, from a coach I've seen in quite a while. All right.
Here we go.
We almost had him. Wow. Don't really know where to start.
Legendary quote, we almost had him. Again, they did have it close in the first half. Bucks scored 40 in the first to their 25, but they brought it back. It was close, and then all of a sudden the Bucks just come out of the second half not missing any shots.
Look, I understand what Will Hardy's feeling, okay? Because Milwaukee used to be that team, that middle league team that always tried to compete with the top dogs. And you would just hope for like a sliver that Milwaukee would able to beat one of those teams in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Like when, for example, back in the early 2010s when Milwaukee would go up against the Miami Heat with LeBron, D Wade, and Chris Bosh.
Yep.
If they beat Miami either in Miami or in Milwaukee, that was our championship.
Yep.
Because we weren't going to go anywhere. So I understand completely what he's feeling because you want to be able to beat. To a lot of people, it might be useless, but to a team like Utah, that's their championship. Like they're not going anywhere this year. And look, I do want to be fair to Utah because they didn't have Jordan Clarkson or Colin Sexton or Lauri Markkanen. Okay, they were shorthanded, and they did keep it competitive for a while, but in the end, this is why Milwaukee is the top team in the East. There's just so many weapons that are coming at you. When you don't have Giannis, it's Chris Middleton. When it's not Chris Middleton, it's Brook Lopez. When it's not Brook Lopez, it's Jrue Holiday. And when it's not Jrue Holiday, it's Grayson Allen. There's just too many weapons. But in this particular game, it was Pat Connaughton who broke out of his shooting slump.
Finally. It took too long. I think he had 6 3-pointers. Yeah, 6 for 10, 8 for 12 shooting overall. When you look at the starting lineup, they were like the heavy shooters. Grayson outscoring the entire team. 25. He started out 4 for 4 on 3 in like 2 minutes. I think he had his 12 to 14 points in the first 2.5 minutes, with Brook having 3 blocks in it was block 3-pointer. They were hot, but yeah, Pat Connaughton, we talked about him last time, of him not playing to his capability and finally having a game where he can shine on. Again, they put him in the starting lineup just because Chris wasn't playing. And it really helped him out a lot. 22 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 6 for 10 on threes. Couldn't miss in the second half.
Well, I mean, Pat did have a little pregame routine that he did. Apparently, he talked to Steve Novak. So, when one shooter talks to another shooter, it kind of brings out good luck.
Yes, when you talk to the lights out Steve Novak, you're going to be hitting your threes. It's good to see Pat finally score. Obviously, he's not going to make 6 3-pointers every game, but for him to make 3 to 4 in the 7 or 8 that he'll shoot, it's always a good sign to see, especially come playoffs, because again, in the finals, he was a huge reason as to why they won some of those games with his corner threes. But yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with the game against the Jazz. Overall, really good game from everyone who played. And again, what's not a Thanasis game without a Thanasis poster? Cannot forget about the Thanasis dunks. Everyone hates on Thanasis, but everyone in Milwaukee loves Thanasis. So again, he's one of our ferocious dunkers, is what you could say. Always has a poster when he comes in. But again, that was a fun game to watch. I enjoyed that one, getting to see Marjan Thanasis, Lindell play. Wesley Matthews again in here for a little bit too. But yeah, it was a good game. Good game. I don't really have much to say just because they absolutely destroyed them. But again, I would just say for the Jazz, they got a really good game from Horton Tucker, and one other guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Fontecchio?
Yes.
Oh, that guy killed us. 26 points.
I usually try to pronounce names, but I did not know how to do that one. But hey, the Jazz are a good team, and sure, they got destroyed by the Bucks this game. But again, like you said earlier, Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, and Colin Sexton are their top 3 players on their team, and they held it for a while. But it kind of shows future-wise that they have some good players to work around. Horton Tucker is, I think, only 20 years old, and he looks like he's 32. Walker Kessler, again, one of those guys who's going to get you blocks. He's going to get you rebounds. I really hate to say positive things about Kelly Olynyk just because I don't really like him. But again, he's someone who could hit a three here or there for you. And Juan Toscano, again, underrated Marquette guy. So they got a good future. Again, they were holding their own ground, especially in the beginning of the season too. They were in first place for a while, but they just need a year or two. I think that's what it'll take. I think for sure next season. But 3 years, I think they'll be a top team if everything plays out well for them.
Yeah. Quick aside, that Thanasis, yeah. Quick aside, that Thanasis dunk was over my guy Micah Potter, who went to the University of Wisconsin. So that
Oh, really?
that hurt me to watch.
I did not know that.
Micah Potter. I was like, but look, no, it was Milwaukee had a season high 42 assists. They were just 2 away from the NBA season high this season, which was 44. So it was extremely close to hitting that. But look, there was a lot of good games all around. Milwaukee was able to shoot 55% from the field, which was pretty insane to me. But let's talk about the first quarter because goodness gracious, Brook Lopez had 3 blocks in 2 minutes.
Him and Grayson Allen just could not stop doing what they were doing. I had to rewatch the game, but I was like following on my phone for a little bit, and it was again just Brook and then Grayson, Brook, great, and it was like Grayson literally had 14 points in like 2 minutes, and Brook had 3 blocks and 4 possessions. It was just they wouldn't stop, and Brook ended up having 7. I don't think he got one in the fourth quarter, but 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 blocks is again almost a triple double with the blocks.
No, and what makes the Brook Lopez's blocks like much more insane is the fact that these aren't like your standard run of the mill blocks. Like these are like really hard plays to defend. Like on some of those blocks, Lopez has had to defend like 2 guys, and then they like the Utah Jazz, they just kept going up for dunks, and Brook Lopez was just like, "What are you doing? Like, I'm like defensive player of the year candidate right now. Like, why are you coming at me?" It's just they forgot who Brook Lopez was. It's like this is what he does. Even if he doesn't get the block, he affects every player's shot.
Yes, and I want to pull up a stat for you that my dad showed me.
Okay.
So a lot of the things with defensive player of the year is everyone goes for who is like the best shot blocker, and there are a lot of stats that people don't look at defensive wise. So Brook Lopez has the most contested shots this season with 1,219. And second place is Evan Mobley with 803. And here is something that's even crazier. It says there's a bigger gap between Brook, who's at number 1, and Mobley at number 2 than Evan Mobley and the number 49 contester. So the bigger gap between first and second than first and 49. I don't know. That's a pretty bizarre stat to kind of think of. Having over 400 contested different, or a 400 shot contest difference for first and second place is mind-boggling. And the amount of blocks that he has too is quite an insane stat, and I think it's overlooked just because so many people aren't really looking at contested shots. They're looking at blocks just overall.
He's just been all over the place this year. He just has. It's just he's been able to defend 2 guys at once. He's even if he does, and again, even if he doesn't, like he'll sometimes even kick the ball just to like be like, oh, if I'm not going to get there, like I'm going to like I'm going to delay it. But Lopez has been like really fun to watch this year. This is not like this isn't who Brook Lopez has been. It's just this year it just feels different. So if he doesn't win Defensive Player of the Year, he's going to get robbed. So good one for Milwaukee against Utah, 144 to 116.
All right, let's
Moving
get
on
this
to the
loss out of the way.
we gotta get the loss out of the way. Unfortunately, Milwaukee had a back-to-back, which wouldn't have been bad, Evan, except it came against one of the top seeds, the Denver Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
Nuggets won 129 to 106. You know, so here's the thing, okay? It was a close game heading into the third, and then Nuggets were up 79-76. Bobby picks up that technical foul.
Mm-hmm. And then everything dropped from there.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
scored 40 points in the second half, if that says anything. They scored 38 in the first quarter, 40 in the second half. I would say the biggest thing, obviously this is like common logic, but the Bucks just like needed to make their shots. They were holding the Nuggets for a while, and then they just wouldn't score for long. It was like watching a March Madness game, like seeing like the Bucks just have a scoring drought streak for 5-6, like they scored 4 points, I think in like 5.5 minutes, and like you're not going to win a game if you do that. And now a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, this officiating sucked. And it's like, yeah, well, officiating doesn't give you a 23-point loss.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there were some very odd calls against the Bucks, and I'm going to say some odd calls for the Nuggets as well. But you don't lose by 23 from the refs. The Nuggets shot 28 free throws. The Bucks shot 21. But again, outside of Giannis and Jokic, their biggest killer was Jamal Murray. Shocker. Again, they just let the 3-point shooters shoot, which again will not win you a game. Fun fact. Bruce Brown trying to act like he was doing something with his 11 points, shimmying like he dropped 50. I was like, okay, interesting. But yeah, it was really just Jokic, Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. That really went away with the game. Really bad shooting game. That's really all I got for this game. 3-pointers, they were 9 for 36. And I almost got the exact prediction correct. I was talking to my dad, and he's like, well, we made 22 yesterday. We're not going to do that today. And I said, yeah, they're going to be 8 for 38 today. And they were 9 for 36. So I almost got that insane stat correct. But yeah, it was just an awful shooting game. And turnovers, they had 10 turnovers, but it was just Giannis and Chris really. But again, just horrible shooting game. That's all I really got for that.
No, and you're right about that. We kind of figured this would be a really tough game for Milwaukee.
It's one of those bad back-to-back games where 3 of your starters score 13 points. I just looking at that and didn't realize that until right now, but it was just no one could really get hot from shooting. Obviously, Giannis at 31, but that's what Giannis averages. So when everyone else is off, then the whole team is off. And then the technicals that were called and those, it wasn't going to go the Bucks way in the second half. So I just kind of turned it off near the end. I'm like, all right, well, I can't put myself through this misery anymore. But again, we just got to see how the Nuggets do in the playoffs. Again, they're like the 76ers again, one of the top teams, and then just kind of fall off. So we got to see what the playoffs bring for them.
Yeah, and look, Milwaukee did get 31 from Giannis. Obviously, you didn't get contributions from anyone else. But what they were the one positive from the game against Denver was they did have 48 points in the paint.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a stat for you, actually. Denver allows the second most points in the paint only to the Detroit Pistons. So Lisa Byington alluded to this yesterday. You don't want to be with the Pistons in any sort of stat.
Yes.
So if we're really talking about playoffs and we're talking about the Nuggets playoff chances, well, I mean, it just won't. It won't go as well as you think, because you just can't allow that many points in the paint. But But it was a fun thing for me yesterday. Obviously, Giannis had 31. Obviously, nobody else really did anything. Watching Jokic up close, because it's not like the Nuggets aren't on national television. It's just, unless you're a true NBA diehard, you're not staying up till 11:30 at night to watch the Denver Nuggets. They will put you to sleep. But I was kind of interested to see watching Jokic up close. And I was like, all right, well, what really makes this guy good? I know he's a good passer.
I was mentioning this. The way he moves his body in the paint, it's like he's flailing his arms and he's moving all around and then layup. And I don't know. I've never really watched a Nuggets game outside of them playing the Bucks, and it was just so weird. I've never really analyzed, because obviously you'll see clips from SportsCenter and ESPN and Bleacher Report, but you're not watching his body in that particular game because you're just seeing the shot. But it was kind of weird.
Here's what I could also explain it at. So people have talked about that Jokic moves at his own pace. And I was telling my brother this yesterday that he's really the only guy that can neutralize Brook Lopez in the paint. Those two big guys were going at it, and it felt like Jokic got the better of him.
Yeah.
Because, he's bumping into him, little scoop layup foul.
Yep. Every possession.
And look, he did force Brook Lopez to have 4 fouls. And nobody's going to bring this up, but Brook Lopez, after he picked up that 4th foul, he wasn't back in the game. He picked up a technical foul, and then they just didn't bring him back in. And it was probably because Budenholzer knew that the game was well in hand anyways, that the Nuggets were probably going to win. So what's the point? But the one play that stuck out to me that was really interesting to me about Jokic was, I don't know if you remember the first play that the Nuggets ran in yesterday's game. It was a double screen. They set a double screen, and he was able to hit a wide open jumper. And seeing a center move like that was like, wow. I don't think I've seen a center who that is some I don't even want to compare him to anybody. You can't compare him to anybody. I just never seen a center move like that, where you're setting a double screen for him and he's taking he's able to take a wide open jumper. It was just wow, that's just Jesus. He's fun to watch. And being Jokic, it doesn't matter in the long run, because MVP,
I was gonna say he doesn't care about the MVPs.
He doesn't.
They're just stored away somewhere in his house. He says he's just off racing his horses in the off season.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And look, a lot of these people in the offseason are going to be like, oh, Jokic gained 25 pounds. It doesn't matter. This man's getting the playing shape.
Okay?
So, a lot of people are going to say something about the officiating, and I understand that. But from the other side of it, Milwaukee did put him in a position to throw the technical fouls in the first place. Okay? When Bobby, so the first technical, okay, Bobby had a glancing blow to Jokic's face. Okay, did Jokic flop a little bit? Yeah, I'll say he did.
Everyone does.
Everyone does. It was a glancing blow. But at the same time, and I get Bobby Portis as an intense player, but you can't clap in a guy's face with the official standing right there. That's going to be a technical foul every time. And the second one, Brooke, I get it. You're frustrated, but you can't be chirping the official for the bench and not expect to get a technical foul. Giannis too. Look, Giannis's play, that was a foul, okay? Because Porter Jr. had good position on him, and he was able to grab the rebound. Giannis did foul him, and then Giannis was spending time talking to the official after. It's that's those three. The Bobby play in particular is where I feel like Milwaukee lost its composure. Because again, it was 79-76. And, Denver was able to hit a couple free throws, hit a 3, and that's where the game was over. It's
exactly.
That's a swing right there. That's a 5-point swing right there. And look, I couldn't even believe it was that close in the first place because I just thought Denver was like, slowly teetering on being slightly better than Milwaukee tonight. And look, a lot of people are going to say, well, it's Denver, so it's high altitude. So, which is fair. I mean, but, Utah is also high altitude, so I don't want to use that too much of an excuse. But look, going into that game, Denver was 30-6 at home. So they're a very good home team. They're very comfortable, like with where they play. And I mean, Denver was just a little better than Milwaukee that night. So, it was a good week for Milwaukee. Went 3-1. I'm going to move on to other topics on the podcast. I mentioned earlier, Giannis simply shows why he's the best superstar in the NBA. He's actually partnering with I want to make sure I get the name right. I'm actually going to give you his little Twitter, his Twitter to see what it is. So he is partnering with Anecdote Health to provide free mental health care services to Milwaukee. Okay. What's your reaction to that?
I like it. It's been like in the works for a little bit, in the past like year or so, but it's finally like official. And he's doing it through his father's foundation. For those who don't know, his dad died a few years ago. But he's calling it the Leave No One Behind campaign. Basically, again, just to have mental health help for those living in the area, just again to make sure that whatever people are going through, again, they're allowed to have the service they need to get help and to basically continue to survive and be who they are. He says that my family's path to the U.S. wouldn't have been possible without the kindness of others. So again, just obviously mental health didn't really have to do with him coming to the United States, but it's the idea of he was helped getting here. Now he wants to help someone in another parameter. And I think it's important just because mental health has become such a important thing in our lives the past couple of years. So I think it's a really good thing to have, and especially him being that spokesperson just kind of shows his commitment to the city and wanting to help the city grow.
No, and that's one of my favorite things about Giannis is, he has a big heart. Okay, he's always going to give back. He's always thinking about others, and that's why I view him as truly one of the humblest superstars in the game, because he'll do stuff like this. Okay, not saying LeBron does it, because LeBron's done a lot of good things in the world and for his community too. This is good for Giannis, good for Milwaukee, because mental health is something that's still heavily stigmatized, and I think people should openly talk about how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis. And look, this is something that needs to be done, not just for Giannis, but for everyone, is that there needs to be more mental health clinics available. Because, I've talked about this with my parents before, where, you try to go to a psychiatrist office and it's like, oh, I can't get you in until it's 6 months down the road. Well, you don't know how you're going to be feeling in 6 months. Okay. So I think people should have access to a mental health service to tell them how they're feeling. Why are they feeling that way on a certain day? So it's good for Giannis, good for Milwaukee. One of the humblest superstars in the game. Evan, last topic on the pod is Kevin Garnett with high praise for Jrue Holiday, where he said that right now Jrue Holiday is the Bucks' best player, despite the fact that in the games before, KG said that Giannis dropped a 40-piece chicken wing dinner. So, what is your reaction to KG saying Jrue Holiday is the Bucks' best player right now?
First, seeing that video again in his interview with Paul Pierce, we did post on our TikTok. There was a comment on our TikTok again at Milwaukee Bucks on tap. One of the comments on our video was, he's like, I get where Kevin Garnett is saying. And when I read his comment, that was kind of how I saw it as. Obviously, the Bucks have Giannis. Giannis, in my opinion, is a pretty good basketball player, and I think millions of people can agree with me on that. I think where he's going with is just the impact that he has offensively, defensively, on the bench, and just on all parameters of the game. He's like their quote unquote best player, just with like the impact that he has on specific plays, both offense and defense. And I think just like his contribution, I think is what Kevin Garnett is going as the best player based off of everything that he's getting to on the court.
I do agree with Kevin Garnett with what he said. And here's the other thing too. He could have even made an argument for Brook Lopez. Okay, we're not saying that the
overall
like who's better, Jrue Holiday or Giannis. That's not what we're saying. What we're talking about is who has more of an impact on the game. Obviously, Giannis will, but as you saw in the series in 2019 against Toronto, what Giannis was missing was good bench players and a good point guard. Okay? I love me some Eric Bledsoe, but he wasn't like a game-changing point guard that Jrue Holiday is. Jrue Holiday, like his defensive acumen changes the game. His ability to really guard the best wing player and their best point guard. Okay, that's who Jrue Holiday is. Like, Lopez even too. Milwaukee's defense suffered slightly last year without Brook Lopez's presence in there. We know how good Giannis is. Okay, but Giannis can't be in all 5 spots at the same time. So
it's hard to ask Giannis to do every single thing. It would kind of remind me of the Kevin Durant in the 2021 series where he was playing like 45 minutes and they're asking him to do every single thing, every single game. But again, the Bucks don't win a championship for 50 years, and here comes Jrue Holiday, and then boom, you win the first year he's in, and now you're the favorites. Again, just how he contributes, keeps his composure well, and just he knows the sport well enough to have that huge of an impact so quick being on a new team. Now, obviously, people don't see that just coming from the Pelicans, but again, just overall his impact on their team, I think, is what Kevin Garnett is looking at, and just showing that yes, Giannis is obviously the best player, but he's playing at a high level overall and being able to keep the Bucks together on some of these games where Giannis or other guys are not having their best nights.
Yeah, like it's basically like who does Giannis need to be successful to win another championship? It starts with those 3 guys right there. It starts with, I guess, 2. It would be starts with Jrue, obviously, then Chris, and then it starts with Brook Lopez. That's who it starts with. Those 3 guys are key, and then you throw in the other guys like Grayson Allen, then Pat, and even throw in Javon. Like that's who Giannis needs to be successful, and that's why Milwaukee's been so good this year because. Middleton for the most part, I mean, he's really outside of the, missing an early part of the season and like missing games due to load management injuries. He's been in there. Lopez has been healthy. He's missed only 2 games. Holiday's been pretty healthy this year, so it's not like that's why I posted the full clip because I've never been a clickbaity guy. I've always wanted to be fair and like post everything in totality. So that's why I posted the full clip on TikTok because I want to be fair to Kevin Garnett because I know whenever I read that, it's like, well, no, he's not. It's Giannis. It's like, no, like, Giannis is important. Don't get me wrong. Like he'll drop 40 to 45, but will he be like LeBron James back in 2007 where he'll will you to a playoff series by himself? Probably not. So we got. Evan, you got anything else?
We got the Pistons tomorrow, the Pacers on Wednesday. Those should be 2 games the Bucks should automatically win. Now, of course, the Bucks again on a back-to-back night play the Celtics.
Ugh.
They are home though, so we'll see how that goes. At 6:30 as well. So I don't know. It's going to be annoying if the Bucks lose that game, and it's going to be here are the Celtics over the Bucks. But then you got that back-to-back night, which is so annoying. But we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping everyone could be healthy for that game. But yeah, the 76ers and the Celtics they got coming up. So those are the 2 biggest games of their last 8 games that they need to win. We'll see. We'll see. We just got to beat the Pistons and the Pacers to start first. Those are the 2 locks that we need.
Yeah, don't count those teams out because, on any given night, any NBA team can beat like each other. So don't never count out the Pistons and the Pacers because there's still and look the Pacers just beat us last time. So it's not so that's not necessarily a gimme game. Detroit, I mean, obviously they're rebuilding for the future. So I don't want to overlook those 2 games, but for sure everyone's really excited to watch the Bucks and the Celtics. So thank you guys for tuning in. This has been this edition of the Milwaukee Bucks on Tap podcast, and we will see you guys next week.